You know what nobody talks about when you hit your 40s? The fact that your body has been quietly running up a tab for years. And around age 44, the bill comes due. I'm Alex, and what I'm about to share might change how you think about aging entirely. If this resonates with what you're experiencing right now, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon, because we're diving deep into the science your doctor probably hasn't mentioned. Here's the conventional wisdom we've all absorbed. Aging happens gradually, 1 year at a time, like sand slowly draining through an hourglass. But Stanford Medicine researchers published something in 2024 that completely upends that narrative. They analyzed over 100,000 molecules in the human body and discovered we don't age gradually at all. Instead, massive biomolecular shifts happen in two distinct waves, averaging around age 44 and again at 60. Think about that for a second. Your mid-40s aren't just another year older. They represent a fundamental biological shift point where thousands of molecules related to cardiovascular disease, metabolism, and immune function all change simultaneously. Around 81% of the molecules they studied showed nonlinear changes, meaning they transformed dramatically at specific ages, rather than declining steadily over time. But here's where it gets really interesting. A study from Australia examined over 500 seemingly healthy adults aged 40 to 75. Every single participant had at least one health deficit. Not some of them, not most of them, every single one. The median number of deficits was 5. More than half didn't meet basic exercise norms or healthy weight standards. Between 30 and 40% already had reduced hearing and cognitive function. The researchers noted that multiple areas of functional decline were already present in people in their 40s and 50s. But there's no public health screening agenda to identify these early deficits, which means most people don't realize the damage accumulating beneath the surface until something breaks. This is what I call health debt, and it builds silently. Let me explain what's actually happening. European researchers followed over 12,000 people for 14 years. Tracking what they called lifetime cumulative adversity. What they found was that stress, inflammation, and metabolic dysfunction don't just add up linearly, they compound. The effects on mobility limitation were stronger than on self-rated health, meaning you feel the consequences before you fully understand what's happening. Drop a comment below if you've noticed changes in your 40s that seemed to come out of nowhere. Now, why does this happen? Why age 44 specifically? Stanford's Dr. Michael Snyder suggested it might partly be lifestyle related. Your mid-40s are often peak stress years, juggling career demands, aging parents, teenagers, financial pressure. But he also noted the changes could be fundamentally biological, tied to the way our cells process damage and repair themselves. Here's what we know from the inflammation research. Starting in middle age, most people develop what researchers call inflammaging, a chronic, low-grade inflammatory state. A Johns Hopkins study followed over 12,000 people with an average age of 57 for approximately 20 years. Those with the highest inflammation biomarkers had an 8% steeper decline in thinking and memory skills. The lead researcher said something crucial. Many of the processes that lead to cognitive and physical decline begin in middle age, and middle age is when they're most responsive to intervention. That's the part most people miss. We think of our 40s and 50s as this holding pattern before old age, but the science is screaming at us that this is actually the intervention window. This is when the molecular changes are happening. This is when you can still redirect the trajectory. A 2023 study in Nature Medicine laid it out clearly. Chronic inflammation starting in middle age leads directly to cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, and neurodegenerative disorders. These aren't separate age-related diseases. They share a common inflammatory pathway that begins decades before diagnosis. The metabolism piece is equally brutal. Research published in 2022 documented exactly what happens metabolically as we transition from young adulthood to middle age. With a sedentary lifestyle and plentiful food, adults accumulate excess visceral fat, develop insulin resistance, and lose muscle mass and strength. The transition accelerates metabolic dysfunction, creating a vicious cycle. But here's the thing that drives me crazy. None of this is inevitable. That same research showed that maintaining physical activity completely prevents the commonly observed reductions in insulin sensitivity with age. Not slows it down, prevents it. Multiple studies on caloric restriction showed that reducing intake to about 75 to 80% of baseline energy requirements maintained insulin sensitivity in overweight, middle-aged adults. A 2025 study from China looked at exercise timing. They compared mice who exercised their whole lives, mice who started exercising in middle age, and mice who stopped exercising in middle age. The middle-aged starters performed almost identically to the lifelong exercisers in preventing metabolic dysfunction. The mice who stopped, they fared the worst. The message is clear. Starting in middle age still works. But stopping? That's when health debt accelerates. So what does this actually look like in practice? First, resistance training becomes non-negotiable in your 40s. The National Institute on Aging found that moderate to vigorous physical activity strongly associates with muscle function, regardless of age. And muscle mass is a better predictor of longevity than weight or BMI in adults over 55. You're not training for aesthetics anymore. You're training to maintain the metabolic machinery that keeps inflammation in check. Second, you need to address sleep as a metabolic intervention, not a luxury. Research from nearly 8,000 people showed those in their 50s and 60s who got 6 hours or less per night had significantly higher dementia risk later in life. Poor sleep is associated with beta amyloid buildup, the protein involved in Alzheimer's. Your 40s are when sleep deprivation starts compounding into serious neurological debt. Third, the alcohol metabolism changes at 44 are real. Stanford researchers specifically noted dysfunction in alcohol metabolism likely results from decreased processing capacity combined with increased consumption during this stressful life period. If you're drinking the same amount you did in your 30s, you're creating more inflammatory damage now than you were then. Fourth, inflammation control through diet matters more than calorie counting. Studies show that lifestyle risk factors like poor diet, physical inactivity, and stress all activate the same inflammatory pathways. Suppressing these pathways through anti-inflammatory foods, omega-3 fatty acids, adequate magnesium and zinc, and reducing ultra-processed foods has downstream effects on every system in your body. And finally, you need regular screening. Blood pressure, metabolic panels, inflammation markers like CRP, cognitive assessments. These aren't optional checkups. They're early warning systems for the molecular changes already underway. Look, I get it. This isn't the fun fitness content that promises abs in 6 weeks. This is the reality of what happens when you cross the biological threshold at 44 and don't adjust your strategy. The health debt metaphor is deliberate. Just like financial debt, health debt compounds. Just like financial debt, ignoring it doesn't make it go away. And just like financial debt, small payments made consistently early on prevent catastrophic consequences later. But here's the empowering part. Unlike financial debt, health debt in your 40s and 50s is still largely reversible. The Australian researchers noted that the deficits they identified are mostly mutable. The Stanford team emphasized that paying attention to your health in your 40s and 60s, adjusting exercise, diet, and alcohol consumption, can intercept these changes before they become permanent. You're not doomed by hitting 44, but you are at a crossroads. The molecular shifts are happening whether you acknowledge them or not. The inflammation is building whether you feel it or not. The metabolic changes are accelerating whether you see them on the scale or not. The question is whether you're going to meet this moment with the seriousness it deserves, or whether you're going to keep running the same program from your 30s and wonder why it's not working anymore. Make sure you're subscribed, because next week we're diving into the second biological cliff at age 60 and the specific strategies that work for that transition. But for those of you in your 40s right now watching this, you're in the intervention window. You're at the point where small changes compound into massive health dividends decades from now. The health debt is building, but the payment plan is still manageable. Start now.